Shalom. This is Hakam Yara ben-Emmett again with another special Torah Parsha lesson and journey to the Torah. I hope everyone enjoys it. Offered exclusively only through my own company. Yes, I'm a CEO of the Torah Watchman Show International Company, LLC, 501c3 company. Pesach, when Pesach falls under a normal year, and it's the sequence of its beginning and ending overlaps Sabbath Kodesh. You have to be very careful about Sabbath rules. I already did a video about this. But for this week, I've noticed that we don't have a Torah cycle planned in our weekly schedule like we normally did, like last week, for instance. But this week, we're thinking about wrapping up Pesach with the Hag, the final 7th days per se. Of course, one note here, Karaite Jews obey the Torah, and we celebrate Pesach all over the world, literally, for 7 days. Rabbinists like to extend an extra day for everything in the diaspora. Why? Because they plan us living the rest of our days in the diaspora and dying here while we're waiting on the Mashiach. Not germane. But it's very it is very prudent to understand what we're discussing here this weekend. I want you to have a blessed Torah Sidra, something here just to digest and think about how important it is to celebrate Shabbat, the 7th day of rest, where every living thing under the heavens and the earth is mandated to rest. It is. Even my cat in my home is resting. But all kidding aside, then you have Pesach as well. So we're going to have a final Seder this coming Saturday evening. So we have plenty of matzah. My wife has made a matzah bra according to her mother's recipe in a home. This week it's been kind of difficult for me working for a Gentile company, taking matzah in my lunch bag. It is what it is. But, it's interesting. We're not going to have any challah this Friday like we usually do. The so-called loaf, the leavened bread loaf. We're going to have just matzah for that. But we're rounding it up. So you have 39 mitzvot quickly for Sabbath. Then you have what the Torah says to be true about Pesach, that, Pesach, it's okay to light a fire, for instance, but on Shabbat, it's absolutely forbidden to do that. On Shabbat, it's forbidden to create or innovate anything from scratch. Of course, under the rule of modification, anything that you began before Shabbat, like in your mind, or if you're needing something, or you have something that's ongoing, that kind of thing, the rule of modification is that gray area there that you continue doing that. Okay. Some people work over the weekends. Most Jews, though, have time off. They get off around 2 o'clock on Fridays if you're Orthodox. Carter Jews around the world, depending on their time zones and everything else, they coordinate that schedule earlier than the rabbinites. They actually love Shabbat so much. It's a Chag Sameach, literally. They start celebrating Shabbat earlier than later. Because in some Cardi homes, they do not light candles like rabbinites, and some do. In my home, I do light candles simply because my wife's ancestor did, and I like candles. We light candles before Shabbat hits, way before, like a balsam, fragrant candle, that kind of thing. We light it like a shamas as a helper candle, and we use that to light other candles. We do have LED lights too. Now, getting all that out of the way, we're talking about a summary of the Passover Torah readings. So on the first day of Passover, as a brief synopsis, we read from the book of Shemot or Exodus, chapter 12, verse 21 to 51. of the bringing of the Passover offering in Egypt, the plague of the firstborn at the stroke of the midnight, the last plague, the 10th plague, and on this very day God took the children out of Israel out of Egypt, because it's so horrifying for the Egyptian people. Even it said that the Pharaoh's own firstborn son died. There was a massive wailing in Egypt. Even for the slave and the John dungeons, officers, and priests, whoever it may be, they suffered that great plague there. The reading of the second day of Passover, and there are Torah readings. Cardi Jews do this too, and they like to read a matzah, just a small sidra portion, each and every day of Passover, to keep their minds on the Passover week, especially in the intermediate days, where you allowed, or by tradition, as I say, you're allowed to do some work and things of this nature. Like for me, I have to drive to work to pay my bills and pay my mortgage during these intermediate days. Okay, so the read from the book of Vayakra, Leviticus chapter 22, verses 26 to 23, and verse 44 is pertinent for Passover. This also includes a list of the Moedim, or the appointed times on the Jewish calendar for festival celebration of our bond with Jehovah our Lord, and the mitzvah to count the Omer. Interesting, Cardi Jews start counting the Omer in this cycle this past Monday, simply because it says in the Torah very clearly, you will start counting Omer on the morrow after Sabbath. And because last week was a Passover was just beginning, on Sunday, that kind of thing was a hard stopper there as far as work and things of that nature. The elaboration, is that you celebrate counting the Omer the very next day. Of course, it's very difficult to count any weight of grain, wheat, or corn, or anything like that in Israel if they haven't brought anything to harvest, much less amount that measures up to an omer. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's close to around between 43 eggs in weight. Okay, that's what they take to the market, and that's what they used to take to the temple for grain offerings. Okay, continuing forward, this is a 49-day countdown. I'll show you a little placard in the back here about that. There is a prayer that we say. We say in Hebrew the day of the month, and then we have a blessing after that. Most people do that by tradition. Chabad even has an application you can download on your mobile device to do that, so you can keep track of that. But there's a blessing of that. Anytime you say a bracha and you're not thinking about yourself, you're thinking about only your relationship with God and how that improve that, that's always a mitzvah and always a good thing. Now, the 49-day countdown is for the festival of Shavuot, which begins on the second night of Passover traditionally, or we went through this before. The obligation to journey to the Holy Temple to see and be seen before the face of God, the Shekinah glory, like in King Solomon's time, not in King Herod the Great's time. On 3 annual pilgrimage festivals, Pesach, Shabbat, and Sukkot. These are pilgrimage celebrations, festivals per se, and that these are to be held in Eretz Israel. Okay, people go move to Jerusalem or travel as patrions, from north, east, west, and south, goes to Jerusalem, and they bring offerings and things of that nature, and they have a wonderful time. It's interesting when we're stuck in a diaspora, I mean, in the United States, technically, legally, you're forbidden to even celebrate one of these pilgrimage festivals in the diaspora, because their full intention is to live in Israel. And that's why so many Cardi Jews have called their home in Israel, so they can celebrate these festivals astutely. Okay, how do we make up for these embarrassing mistakes and awkward moments? Well, we give to charity, to DACA and things of that nature, to show God that that we hope for better times ahead, that we can actually move our family to Eretz Israel. I plan on moving my family within the next few years, hopefully, if everything works out with that. Now, the readings for the 4 intermediate days of Passover include as follows: instruction to commemorate the Exodus by sanctifying the firstborn, avoiding leaven, and eating matzah on Passover, telling one's children of the story of Exodus. And rabbinists like to add about donning tefillin. Tefillin is not even the Hebrew Bible. It's not mentioned in detail. It's mentioned as a symbol, something as we do, as we emulate the instruction of remembering Zakor, the commandments of God, is differentiated quite a bit from actually Sezit, which God actually tells you in detail how to construct it with the one blue thread on 4 corners of your body, and how to do that, how to wear it. And there are Shema prayer that we say every morning, every evening. We recite and we kiss our tzitzit every time we say the word tzitzit. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this, but in Exodus 13:1 through 16, this is where rabbinites, if you're interested, is where they get the so-called mandate for tefillin, but it's only a mandate in the rabbinate's imagination and mind, and not from the Torah. I'm sorry I had to get that away. Number 2, a portion from the Parshah of Mishpatim. I'll show you a placard for this starting point, which includes the laws of the festivals, okay? The rules, the requirements, and things of this nature. But you'll find these listed in Exodus chapter 22, verses 24 through 23, and verse 19. Okay. Number 3, a section describing Moshe receiving the second tablets of God's revelation to him on his 13 attributes of mercy, which likewise concludes with the laws of festivals in Exodus 34, verses 1 through 26. Let me add something here. Rabbi Tobias Singer seems to be leaning toward Muslim more than Christian per se, because he says they're strict monotheistic. Okay, so he's assuming that the God of the Muslim is something other than the God of Moshe. Well, how do you define who your God is? Well, God told us very clearly his 13 attributes of loving kindness and mercy. His Kasdo V'Elam Vayed, 13 attributes. You can I actually did this. I Googled it and I looked up the attributes. I think there are 10 or 12 of Allah, and weigh those two together. You'll see we're talking about 2 completely different entities. I thought that was interesting bringing out. Please research for yourself. This is not my opinion, but God says very clearly, this is how you know me among the gods of the nations. So when one of the immediate days of Passover is on Shabbat, like this weekend, that's why I'm doing this video, this reading is read on that day and begins 12 verses earlier with chapter 3, verse 12. And number 4, section 4 in this breakout here, the story and laws of the second Passover is very important. That you'll find us in Bamidbar, Numbers, chapter 9, verses 1 through 14. What is second Passover? Well, this is very interesting, and I've covered this in my Parsha videos on the Torah Watchman channel, YouTube. You can go and see those videos and that content there. Just look up the Parsha name against the name of my company, and you'll find it on Google very clearly, or just look up my name. There's only one of me in the YouTube universe. But anyway, the second Passover is for those Jews and families that did not have the opportunity in the big rush to get out of Egypt with all the plagues and everything else. They didn't, whether they were poor, paupers that could not have access or find a worthy Passover lamb that was spotless and worthy of that kind of not sacrifice, I would say, or atonement per se, but actually that lamb was to be eaten and roasted. Christian, you hear me? This lamb that was killed was not actually killed to atone for anyone's sins, like it was done later on in the desert and temple sacrifices. It was killed, and its blood was painted literally on the doorpost of every home to protect the people living there. Is God's commandment against the angel of death. Well, what would happen if you didn't have a lamb of your own? You had to prepare that lamb days before. Actually, the drop dead date is on the 14th of Nisan. You had to select that lamb and literally bring it in your homestead that doesn't get injured or sick or anything. But what if you didn't have money, a resource to get that lamb, and someone else had to loan out lamb or meat and that kind of thing to you? Whatever the impediment was, God's grace and mercy endures forever. So in the desert, God gave those Jews an opportunity to celebrate Passover one last time before they would enter the promised land. That's the point I'm trying to make. God made a compromise with his holy mitzvahs. God can compromise his mitzvahs with our lives, but we cannot compromise the enforcement of those commandments between us and God. That's the way it goes. Rabbinists like to compromise everything. Their 50 Shades of Gray is represented in dozens of Talmud tractates. But the second Passover is something we celebrate over exactly 1 month from the beginning of the first Passover. And make sure you have enough matzah in your home to do that. If you use a Seder plate or something similar to that, just bring that out, say some brachos and blessings. It's only 1 day. And it's a blessing to remember again. It's always wonderful to remember the blessed miracles and tender mercies of the Lord our God, isn't it? Especially before your children. Now, on the seventh day of Passover, we read how on this day the sea split for the children of Israel and drowned the pursuing Egyptian. I'm posting a placard here. You can show the real archaeological correct, scholarly correct migration path from the Jewish people in Goshen, Egypt. They crossed the Sea of Reeds. They crossed the King's Highway of Mount Sinai, went all the way across to Port Aqaba. This is known as almost a 7-day journey. It's flat plains until you get to the mountains that kind of come upon you suddenly when you get close to the Port Aqaba to the far southeast part of the Sinai Peninsula, which is very interesting. The Jewish historian Josephus speaks about this too, about that migration path. And this is where the Egyptians were ultimately destroyed when God allowed the Jews to pass the Red Sea at the port of Aqaba and brought the sea crashing down on the Egyptians and their 600 chariots. Also, the Song of the Sea, I want to point out here as a Sephardi Jew, Rashi makes up some crazy notions about this, that Miriam was not singing. I don't know why it's so important to say Miriam and the sisterhood that she led during that time in tribal Israel after they crossed the Red Sea and they were celebrating with tambourines and musical instruments and maybe drums and things like that, singing, make a lot of noise and happiness. God actually gave Miriam that song, the Song of the Sea. It's actually attributed to her, not Moshe, but Moshe wrote it down because it's actually divine inspired to Moshe's older sister. So yes, she sang that song out. Women are discouraged to sing among men for various reasons. You can talk to a rabbinate if you want to about that. I have notions about this. I've done videos. It's not germane to talk about that any further. But we actually, in many homes, we have Miriam's cup at our Passover table, like we have the cup at the Eliyahu too, just for memory and significance, pointing back to the Torah. Now, you can read Exodus chapter 13, verse 17, through chapter 15, verse 26 for a full summary and commentary. Rounding this up, now, if you're a Sephardi Jew, you're done at the seventh day. If you're a rabbinate, an Orthodox minded Jew that follows the Talmud, well, again, almost every holiday I could think of, Jewish holiday, like Rosh Hashanah and others, the rabbinates always mandate an extra day for it. Why? Because we live spread out in the diaspora throughout the rest of the world, different time zones, different countries, different governmental powers, different cultures and things, the language and things like that. They give us another day. Why? Because they plan on staying in the diaspora forever, because that helps maintain their power base. Is what it is. But on the 8th day of Passover, it says we read, and you can read on the 8th day if you want to, but it's not a Torah mandate to do that. Deuteronomy or Devarim, chapter 15, verse 19, through chapter 16, verse 17. So those areas there. Like the reading of the second day, it catalogs the annual cycle of the festivals. Devarim is after a summary of the books of Exodus and Numbers and Leviticus. Special observances and offerings brought on these occasions to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. The rabbinists emulate all of this because they plan on staying in the diaspora forever until the Mashiach yells at them, "Why are you still in America? Why are you still in Australia? Why are you still in the UK? Don't you know that you should be living in Israel? Why are you there?" So they keep on doing that, and they're listening for that shofar blast of Eliyahu to call the Jews home. You know, the Mashiach would never fix stupid, is my motto here. So on the 8th day, special connection with the future redemption is reflected in the Haftorah reading from the prophets, the Navim. You can read this Isaiah chapter 10, verse 32 through chapter 12, verse 6. And that pretty much wraps this up. So this is just a synopsis. It's the Parsha in a nutshell. I want you to have some delicious Torah, delicious meat on the bone per se, this Sabbath, and just because there's not a normal Torah cycle reading like we usually do. And I don't want to just post good Shabbat to you. I don't want to just post Sabbath Kodesh to you, good Yom Tov to you, without having my message of love to you. For you can share that knowledge of wealth and love and that treasure of joy and happiness that God gives every single Jew, every single ben-Emmett, every single human being that just wants to open my mind and heart. The one truth espoused by the great prophet of Moshe and the thousands of other prophets of blessed memory. All the sacrifices I made for us to have the Chumash, to have the Torah, access to Torah today is nothing short of a miracle. You are a miracle. You are a miracle to be living the day and have access to so much information before you that our tribal ancestors could not read, they were not literate, and much less they could not communicate with their neighbors because they were at war with their neighbors quite a bit. Now God gives us a bridge of opportunity to share that wealth of knowledge and love and truth with other people. Well, this is Hakam Yara ben-Emmett signing out again. Until next time, God bless you. Shalom Aleichem.
If you've enjoyed this program, please click like and subscribe.